Hi and welcome. Thank you all for joining us in today's interview with somebody that I have been dying to talk to because it seems that he has been working with everybody else that I've interviewed so far. Adam Atkinson. Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And so your Instagram is SeeYouLaterLeaner. I love it. And I was wondering, where did that come from? And better yet, can you share your background with us and how you got into fitness and how do you do it all? Because it seems that you are working nonstop with all the competitors in the world.
Well, I'll start with kind of how I got into this. So, first of all, from a very young age, and not that I count this as experience, I remember watching my dad lift, and my dad was a third shift worker. So when he got home from work, my wake up time, that was his workout time. So I'd usually be playing in the garage and watching him lift. And my excitement at the end of his lifts was him allowing me to, do a bench press or two here and there. So kind of always followed it, watched his journey. When I had went to college, I was a track athlete. I was a pole vaulter and a cross country runner. I ended up getting really sick during my sophomore year. And it wasn't until the summer I realized I'd been fighting off mono, and that was why I had all these crazy waves and sickness. So I pushed to a point it got really bad. And obviously, everyone gains the freshman 15 in college. And essentially, I was like, now that I've got all this weight off from being sick, I'm going to start maybe running or doing track and field again. Well, I realized I hated it unless I did it competitively. So all I knew was, well, the next thing I can do is stay in shape, is be like my dad and lift every morning. So me and him really connected over that. And I think it was the summer of 2002, the local YMCA opened up and they had hired me as a trainer there. So that was my first initial, coaching job, so to speak. Obviously, it's very limited working as a Y at a Y. And then everything progressed from there. So before I knew it, I had been working for my uncle in Columbus, Ohio as like a electrician, but my client base in Columbus really started to boom because I moved to a bigger city. And then eventually I left my family company to start what would become See You Later Leaner, which is kind of a funny story. I was known for transformations and weight loss before really competition prep. So when my clients would leave the gym, they would say, "See you later." And then I would just say leaner because I knew the next week the goal was to lose weight. And people were like, "You need to make a shirt or a team name." I really thought it was silly. But one of my clients, she had a boyfriend who was a graphic designer. He created the logo, and we've rolled with that ever since.
That is so cool. I love it. So, and so when you went to college, that's what you studied, or did you just like from practice? How did that happen?
Yeah. So initially, I was in college to become a gym teacher. I did end up doing a technical college while I was training people. So my passion was always training, but I ended up with a degree in robotics specialization and electronic engineering. So,
Wow, that's
yeah.
complete. Yeah. So what pushed you to pursue that?
Honestly, I felt like I had to complete something. And since honestly, when I was better from mono, just returning to college wasn't an option for me. So, and I just really like, even in college, I remember helping my friends lose weight. That was one of the things that really was like, I want to do this. I want to ride bikes with people in the morning or swim with overweight people and just help them make their lives a little bit better.
That's so amazing. So, and then you started your company, See You Later Leaner, and where is it based?
So right now we're in Columbus, Ohio, but we're getting ready to make a big move to Nevada in July, and we'll be in Las Vegas, which is like the fitness capital of the world.
Right, right. I've only recently realized that isn't that where the Olympia is held every year?
It
Yeah.
is, yeah.
And I only recently realized that, Las Vegas is big into fitness, mainly, I guess, because of that event. I mean, I don't know. And there are a lot of competitors who live there and like who train there. Obviously, the person who won the Olympia last year, Jennifer Dory, she
Yeah.
lived there. Yeah. So that's like the extent of my knowledge with regards to Vegas being a fitness hub. So you're gonna be there soon.
Yes. And then, someone I have to give a credit nod to is where I really started learning nutrition was through Dr. Joe Klemczewski. So he's the owner of the Diet Doc, which is like a nutrition licensing company. So we license with him. We have a medical director on staff. So it really is a nice, complete, educated program, and you get a lot of help and support. And what was nice when I was learning, I always had Joe to lean on to help me with clients that I maybe felt like I would maybe need to turn away, whether they had a health issue or something like that. I would always, CC Joe and say, hey, can you help me work with this person? And, over many years of doing that, you come across so many different cases with people.
Right. That's wonderful. Yeah, I do see that. I guess in your email, it says the Diet Doc and then on your Instagram. And I was going to ask you about that. So have you personally went through weight struggles before, choosing to pursue this path?
Yeah, I really was in college, I think, sensitive to my image, maybe more than most guys. And I think part of that is, I mean, I watched wrestling growing up, which people might think is silly, but those guys had incredible physiques. And it really, in my mind, probably impacted me because I wanted to be like those guys.
Right.
So I feel like I almost understand how like women feel, because like that was my world. And I felt like to be a guy, you have to have like a big chest or big arms or ripped abs. So I think that I always felt that pull. Not that my parents ever made me feel like, I had to look a certain way, but I think that definitely impacted how I felt about myself if I was a little bit heavier.
Interesting. That's cool. And then you had a role model in your dad who you saw, lifting and exercising. That really impacts us on almost a subconscious level. Like we don't even realize how much of an impact that has on us. And we just grow up thinking like that's normal. We just, we wake up and we work out, whereas some other people might not have had that role model and they have to like work even harder mentally to get there. So that's great, and you've also been very lucky in that aspect. Let me ask you, because I see you working with all of these competitors, where do you get your drive from? Because it takes a lot of work to do what you do.
My drive's off the feeling of my people. I can tell that they're excited about their updates, and they're excited about what they're doing. We had a really good week at nationals. A lot of my girls are excited. A lot of my girls trying to get to that level are riding off of their excitement. So, your team and your energy is like a stock. It kind of goes in waves, and you're not always going to be motivated. But I think it's really important in these times where things are going really well is to let that momentum pass down the chain. So one big thing with our team is we do daily phone calls Monday through Friday, and it's an hour-long Zoom session where anyone can jump in and talk to me about anything. And I really like that open group because it gets people to learn how to communicate with you and ask questions, or if they're shy, they hear someone ask the question that they maybe wanted to ask as well.
And that sense of community on top of all of this support as well provides such a motivation for people because they feel like they belong to this group, and that group's identity is fit and healthy and disciplined. And it's a very powerful thing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think what's unique about my team too is we don't have like one all-star athlete that's like fueling it. We have a lot of transformations. I think a lot of coaches have like their one market of person, but we have moms, we have people with diseases, autoimmune. We have so many people who are doing this. At one point in time, I had a blind girl who was working with me who competed.
Wow.
She'll be back in the summer. And then I also had a lady with one arm who was working with us, and that
Wow.
was really exciting.
I'm going to ask you to connect us because I absolutely need to hear their story eventually. That is so amazing. And I feel like a lot of the people you work with have inspiring stories, like Amanda Francis that I just interviewed. After having a stroke, she's it's not like the stroke pushed her to start eating healthier. She was already doing the work to get healthier and lose weight. And then she has a stroke and then she sticks with it. And you work with her. A lot of trainers also might feel a little bit worried about continuing on, and they told her she couldn't lift more than 50 pounds. And, it's really inspiring the work that you do.
Yeah, it's so important that I had Dr. Joe on my staff during that time. And, he's very helpful. And, obviously having our medical director, because Amanda had just started with me and then that happened. And she's been with me for a very long time now. And I just still go back to like, wow, when she checked in after having the stroke, I was like, this is a different beast of somebody I'm working with. And I knew there was something very special within her to not throw in the towel. So early in the game when she hadn't even really seen a result to feel like she needed to continue.
Yeah, that's true. Very few people would do what she did, and given the circumstances, given everything else also that you could have used as an excuse, the age, the fact that you have kids, I don't know how many jobs. I mean, it's just incredible. So do you, and let me ask you one more thing before we dive into like the diets and stuff. Do you do all of this by yourself? Is it like a one-man show?
So the coaching for my clients is done by me. We have other coaches. So we have Kat, Zach, Roseanne, Anna, and Eliza. And my wife does a small amount of coaching. We have a business advisor, Fran. He goes by Fran. His name's Fran Schott. And then my wife actually does all of the billing. So I don't mess with any finances. So I've got to give her credit to the fact that I wouldn't have the time to just kind of keep my head down and into my people's details if I was worried about the financial aspect.
Right. I figured that this was the case because the sheer amount of athletes that you work with is mind blowing. Every time I check your Instagram, I was like, how many people is he working with?
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
We have had a long run. I have a guy who's until the move has trained with me for about 6 years. So it's easier as people stay with you longer to grow. And I think that's what people who are maybe looking up to me in terms of numbers. It's not that I'm adding hundreds of athletes a week. A lot of people have chosen to stay for a long time, which makes it easy to say, hey, let's try to maybe add 2 more this year, and also the other coaches growing really helps because sometimes they'll pass an athlete to me after a certain point or vice versa. So we can really find a good fit for everybody.
And that's a testament also to your work and the results you're getting them, because clearly if you weren't getting them the results, they wouldn't stick with you for 6 years. You see that a lot in the fitness world where it's like hopping from coach to coach, right? So that's a testament to the results you're getting, which is wonderful. All right, let's dive into the diet stuff. What diet generally would you feel is, and actually before I ask you this question, do you mainly work with bikini or do you work with other divisions as well?
Yeah, so we work with all divisions. So we really do have a wide variety. I think that makes our team pretty unique as well.
Right. You froze
We're
for a
bikini
second.
dominant, I would say.
You're say that again, you froze for a second.
Oh yeah, we're relatively bikini dominant, but that's just because it's the most popular division.
Right, that's true. Okay, so let's focus with the bikini division since you work the most with that and since I'm the most passionate about that. The question would be, what diet do you feel is most effective for weight loss and getting your competitors in shape for competition?
Yeah, what they will stick to. And that is, I don't really marry to a specific ideology. And I just had a phone call with a client yesterday. She wants to compete for the first time. And she's been on with me for 3 weeks and she is not technologically sound at all. So I had my wife email her or mail her documents. I haven't done this in many years, but it's our old system. Here's your documents, fill these out, but take a picture of them and send them to me. So we're on our phone call and I said, so let's open up your MyFitnessPal. And she like gave me a blank stare. And I said, we need to start from square one. I said, let's do a meal plan. Would that be better for you? And she said, absolutely. She said, the simpler we can make this, the better. So my goal is to start there and then maybe give her some homework and say, I want you to change meal one with foods you like. So it's really a dynamic approach. So getting this girl to start, I think, is the biggest step in her journey because she's tried 2 other coaches and it didn't work. And this is why, because she's very, very new to dieting. So it just takes that individualized approach to give something to someone that they can follow.
Wonderful. So the best diet is the diet that you can stick to. It doesn't matter what if we're only talking weight loss, obviously, like if you check out my channel, I talk a lot about also health, overall health and carnivore diets and keto and things like that. But if we're only talking weight loss and we don't have any other goal or any other skin issue that we're trying to address, then yes, the best diet is the diet that you can literally just stick to. Yeah, I figured you were gonna say that. So I guess let me do another follow-up to that. Let's say adherence is no problem. We have the compliance, we have the competitor that's gonna do the work that's required no matter what. Would you, or have you ever noticed a lower carb or even 0 carb or as low carb as you go? Do you feel like that speeds up weight loss or like troubleshoots if you've noticed a plateau?
So as long as the calories are going downward with that lower carb approach, yes. But however, I do find if you're kind of higher fat, you're just not getting that thermic effect of food that you do with carbs. So technically, you could have higher carbs at the same calories as like maybe a higher fat diet, and you're actually going to burn more calories digesting the carbs versus the fat. So I actually tend to be a little bit more pro lower fat dieting. Now the hormone crowd is going to say, well, cholesterol drives hormones. However, when you're losing body fat, you're going to use those triglycerides. So you are essentially getting some fat mobilization and utilization from that. Also, just when you diet, you're going to suppress hormonally anyhow. And that's where it's really important to, not push 7 days a week and actually take some time off. And, this is why it's not necessarily wrong to lose your menstrual cycle during a prep, but it's important to know maybe why it's happening. It's cortisol rising, stealing from progesterone, et cetera. And, if we teach our clients about this and why that's happening and that we can get their menstrual cycle back with blood work and prescribing the right exit strategy post-show, that's really important.
And that's what happened with Celeste also when I interviewed her, and she told me working with you is what led her to have her cycle back again. And you did the blood work, and you ordered, I think you gave her supplements, and we were trying to remember what supplements you gave her. She couldn't remember. I think she mentioned something, but I can't remember. What are some of the supplements that are known or that you use that help a competitor regain her cycle?
Yeah, so for her, if I remember correctly too, I don't have her folder open, but I do remember she was declined in DHEA, which is like a precursor to all hormones. So that was very unique about hers. Also, testosterone was pretty crashed. She was just kind of crashed along the board. But chasteberry can be very helpful with, increasing progesterone. Now, one thing that I want to remind our audience of, you can take all these supplements, but if you're grinding and doing 7 days a week cardio, those supplements aren't going to do anything for you to help those levels. So just like I like to remind my people, if squats are hurting your knees, we should maybe look at your form of your squat versus give you a joint formula. So, because that joint formula is not going to do anything if you're squatting poorly.
Yeah, treat the root cause first and then supplement with other things that are going to help. Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. Do you believe in cheat meals, or do you also do it like a personalized approach, depending on the competitor?
Yeah, I'm really sensitive to the words we use. So, like intuitive eating, I like to call intelligent eating. So, I do like to just call those cheat meals, just untracked meals. So, I want people to really lower cortisol and recover. So putting down the phone and not tracking something. And we all know moms do it. They're busy. They get the phone out, and then it's not even about just tracking the macros at that point. It's then the 5 texts that somebody sent you. And something I actually like to do with my competitors when we go out to eat is we put our phones on top of each other in the middle of the table.
Yeah, I love that strategy. Never actually done it just because we don't go out to eat almost ever. But it's a great thing, especially if like you're a group, because it's just everybody's, including myself, is so addicted to their phones. And every time I pull up my phone, I have so many reminders and messages and notifications. So it's like you wanted to check one thing, you end up spending at least 10 minutes doing everything else to just clear the notifications. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, so not a cheat meal, an untracked meal. I like that. Is there anybody who might come to you and tell you, like, for example, myself, I noticed that if I include, like if it fits your macros or things that are addictive, my brain gets like wants more. I have like this sugar addiction that I've struggled with in the past, and binge eating. And so for me, it's easier for me to clear those things from my diet and not schedule a cheat meal, because after a cheat meal, the next day is so difficult for me mentally. Like I have brain fog and all I want to do is just eat more crap. So have you ever had experience with that in the past?
Yeah, I have a few girls who don't like taking their refeed for that reason. So I think a lot of times it's explaining or approaching it differently. So maybe instead of a refeed, we do a larger post-workout meal, and we still refeed.
Yeah.
But Sometimes people feel better just by the fine-tuned timing of it. Not that it necessarily makes a difference, but it kind of seems to give them more purpose. Like, I just hit this lagging body part, and it actually is a little beneficial in off season to do a larger meal after a lagging. So why not place it there? But also kind of explain that if you're doing this at the gym, you then have the whole entire drive home to then kind of process that meal. And then you're not at home like going through the cupboards having even more. So usually I'll try, like for you, if you like sugar and feel like you can't have it, maybe just do a peanut butter cup at the gym, and then you only have one there. So then you're out of them. By the time you hit your workout, you might be like, oh, I don't really feel like I need 10 of them now.
Right, like that urge goes away throughout the workout, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're not at your house where you can just easily open a cupboard. That's truly why we're in such a obese society, is we have refrigerators versus having to go for the hunt.
Yeah, that's true. Besides having to do a full workout before you get to eat something that's not that addictive eat anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, how many check-ins do you do with your clients? I know you have the daily, group where you're doing the Q&A and all that. But in addition to that, they send you their check-in progress pictures, right? So how often do you do that?
Yeah, so for regular and competitors, we start with once a week. And then honestly, depending on what the client needs, I will mold something for them. So obviously everything within reason, but I have a couple people who struggle with adherence, and I just ask for an Instagram message at the end of each day. Hey, I hit my macros. It's just that little bit of accountability that they need. And then it doesn't clog my inbox, because they really just need that quick, like, hey, I'm doing good. And that kind of helps me, because then if they're doing that 5 days in a row and then they stop, I'm going to be like, hey, so-and-so's in trouble. so,
Right.
so maybe
Yeah.
I should reach out to them. I try to be good about that. But when competitors are in peak week, we do 3 times a day, morning, midday, and then after all their food at night. So then we can help them dial in their physique exactly how we want it for the show.
And those times a day during peak week, that's like generally Monday. Does that start Monday or start Saturday? Exactly.
So as long as it's a Saturday show, it'll start on Saturday. So last night, the girls for Universe started on Friday, which was a little confusing for me because I'm so used to going Saturday to Saturday. So
Yeah, I think Celeste is going to Universe, right?
so she's going to do the Dennis James this weekend, and then
Right.
she's going to shoot for USA's.
Right. Okay, cool. And do you do measurements and scale too, or your main focus is the progress pictures?
Main focus is the progress photos, and we do daily weight if able. I still flex off of that. Some people don't want to weigh themselves every day. Some people need more training in what the number means to them. And, I'm sensitive to that, and I think that's really important to teach people that it's so cliche that the scale really isn't anything,
At a
but
number.
you
Yeah.
really do have to find ways to reveal that in their eyes, so whether that's bulking for a bit and then dieting back down to a same weight and then finally getting them to compare those photos together, they're like, oh wow, he's right, the scale really isn't anything.
Yeah. I've seen some pictures on Instagram of fitness models of the same weight. They'll tell you what their weight was before and now. It's like the same exact weight, but they look two worlds apart. I mean, it's crazy how much body composition can change without ever seeing any change in the scale. And sometimes the scale even goes up if you're putting on muscle.
Right.
So yeah, you can lose your mind if you just focus on that. So
Absolutely.
I was wondering, and I know that you're gonna say probably that the body fat percentage is variable, like what body fat percentage we need to shoot for is going to be variable depending on the person's genetics, body type, frame, all that kind of stuff. But very generally, what would you say would be a body fat percentage for fitness versus for competition as a novice?
Yeah. See, that's so hard because we kind of talked about this in Forbes where, it's really, I would want to see somebody's labs before, I comment on that, because they could have a lower body fat and still have like high glucose. So, or high cholesterol. So, those internal markers are really important. How stress is their body, is bone density at risk with their body fat being, at a certain level. So those are kind of the questions I like to add, but I have competitive swimmers who never really get an off season too. So we check for those things, but luckily they're in a non-impact sport, but they do, it's not just competitors that have bad blood work or low progesterone. It's your hyper athletes, it's your CrossFitters, it's your power lifters, it's your endurance athletes. It's pretty much in every sport. I think that bodybuilding just gets a bad rap because we're sometimes not the best at making the most healthy decisions in terms of we would say like boutique supplementation if they choose to go down that route.
Yeah, I like that, boutique supplementation. So depending on the blood work, you would kind of determine what body fat, but in terms of like looking at, at somebody, in terms of looks, I guess the question is, would you say a 21% body fat, 20%, like for lifestyle? If people are listening to this and they're thinking, okay, well, I want to get healthier, I don't necessarily want to compete, but I just want to achieve a fit look, like, and this is my body fat percentage now, like what should my body fat percentage be, like what should I aim for? Because I feel like even though it's very, I know, very variable, sometimes having a number, you might be very close to it, and that might be motivating to the person listening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I always found back when I did body fat tests, I felt like a lot of women looked great at like 20%, to be honest. Now you have to remember women's body fat's always going to be higher than men.
Yeah.
But I remember one of my first body fat tests. I told the girl she was 20 and that was great, but she thought she was like 10 because she based it off of her husband. And I will say they were pretty similar leanness because I did his test too, but she was mortified that she was 20. And I was like, but you're naturally always going to be higher than men. And I thought that she looked great,
Yeah, I figured you were gonna say that number. I see that, like, that's generally, although there are women at 28% body fat and they look fit, and you're like, how is it 28%? You're assuming it's very close to like in the teens, and it's like, no, it's in 28. So it's so variable. But yeah, I guess I would say I would agree with the number you said. That's been my experience as well. Okay. So with regards to the exercise that you generally recommend, I know that a lot of your clients will do, let's say 2 hours of long duration, not necessarily high impact. Do you ever do HIIT? And what are your thoughts about what kinds of cardios to implement?
Yeah. So when my competitors are at the end of prep and they maybe are in those really, really low body fat stages, the goal is to keep food as high as possible and cardio low as possible. Celeste is at a pretty high level of cardio. We're also kind of correcting some framework from what I had been given to work off of because she was with a prior coach prior, and I think they did a good job with her. She was just ready for something a little more in the details. So I think I probably could have kept her cardio lower had she started the process with me. So, but in that regard, I do like some HIIT cardio, but we've got to remember these people are already strength training. So they're getting great muscle activation, and also their cortisol is usually super high, and HIIT usually will just kind of raise that quite a bit. So towards the end of the prep, I'll usually move towards more a steady state cardio. During the off season, I might use HIIT to deplete glycogen stores to, help them be able to store more glucose, or maybe even raise intake a little bit higher. So there's kind of different scenarios where I'll use HIIT or steady state, or the reasoning why I might use one over the other, or maybe both.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does take a lot, obviously, to compete. And so, it's okay to create those large calorie deficits and the long durations on cardio, especially as you get closer to a show, because that's what it takes to be competitive. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. This is why most people don't compete. Most people aren't walking around with competition body. So yeah, it takes a lot. And I think we're touching upon some of the stuff that it takes. We touched upon the exercise. Let's touch upon the diet and how like, what does it take to eat like a bikini competitor?
I think the biggest thing is planning. Even though I'm a huge, influencer of macro dieting, when you just randomly eat throughout the day, you make mistakes. So if you really plan ahead, that's a very fail-proof plan. So I really believe if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, essentially. So doing that meal prep is huge, and then just taking it seriously. So I really think following instructions, sticking to your diet, because that moment you do binge, a lot of women will maybe not tell me, and then they try to recorrect with some extra cardio or a low day. And before you know it, they've created this snowball effect before they finally contact me. And that makes it tough, because when they've already decided they're done. I had a girl message me one morning, and she was about 6 weeks out, and she said, "I'm done." I was like, let me jump on the phone with you real quick, because she looks incredible. And I was like, send me your pics tomorrow. And what I saw from her versus what she told me on the phone were two completely different things. So her mind was just really in a bad spot because she went over. Actually, I will say her body looked better after she had went over, because we were pushing pretty hard too. And I was like, I'm glad we caught this here. You're ready. Let's move your food intake up. And she's like, I can't believe you just told me to do that, because I'm here thinking I don't look good enough. I was like, no, you actually look better. Let's move food up.
Amazing. And this has happened to me too. I know exactly that mindset that you get into after you eat stuff you're not supposed to eat, and it depresses you so much because you feel like you let yourself down, and that clouds your judgment as to how you see yourself, because you might look exactly the same, but mentally you can't see that. Mentally you think that you've blown up in one day, and that's not how it works. So
yeah, and this scenario worked because she was ready. If she were 10 weeks out and doing this, I would have been like, we need to keep going and keep going lower.
Right. But yeah, so you raised her food intake back up, and you kind of like maintained, and maybe a little bit obviously of not maintained when you're 6 weeks out, but slowed down the intensity a little bit.
Yep. And actually started storing more glycogen in the muscle tissue now and focusing on recovery. So it's going really well for her.
Let me ask you about recovery. That's the thing that I feel most people struggle with, because when you are like a type A competitive, always working, hustling, doing everything, it's the hardest thing in the world to recover, to say one day I'm not going to do anything, or at least not go as hard as I normally do. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, and I'm really big on trigger words. So the big one now is active recovery. You know, everyone's saying that, and I'm like, if your goal is recovery, like actually recover. And I believe you're right, and it is within our elite athletes that are just those go-getters that just don't stop, that you really need to preach that to. And that kind of goes into my protect your house philosophy. So, you know, recovering may not be the funnest thing to do, but it definitely needs to be done to protect your whole house. You know, it's like putting new shingles on, is gain that rest. Actually, don't actively recover, just rest and recover. And you know, I actually like my people to be a couch potato, or not worried about counting their steps for the dang day, you know, like just actually rest.
Oh, you know what? Now that you mentioned it, I'm going to add it because I absolutely want to ask you about the steps. But first, do you generally schedule one day a week for pretty much everybody, or like how often do you schedule that recovery day?
The goal is always to keep one day a week in. Try to hang on to two if we can. And usually I'll maybe back training down to 3 days a week. If, like for Celeste, for instance, where cardio is really high, we're only training 3 to 4 days a week. So the weightlifting's geared down, but the fat loss phases are in high gear. Now in the off season, the cardio will go down, the training will be a majority of our systemic stress load for the week. So yeah, it's just kind of shifting gears and making sure that everything's prioritized at the time that it needs to be.
Okay, got it. And then the steps. I think I forgot to ask you about that. We talked about the cardio, the HIT, maybe more in the improvement season, more of a low intensity, especially as you get closer to a show. And then on top of that, like, what is the general recommendation for steps?
Yeah, so me and Joe created a pandemic with these steps. So we had to tell you where this originated from. Is when clients stopped losing weight and we looked at their food logs and they were eating everything that they said they were, you know, we knew adherence was fine. So why are they not losing weight? They're becoming couch potatoes because of the deficit. So now they're no longer in a deficit. So towards the end of prep, Joe and I would track steps for our clients. Well, as we coached more people and more people became coaches, everyone has said, everyone's going to track steps all the time now. Just like it's the new drink a gallon of water a day. I don't track steps with any of my clients until they need to. If you want to raise somebody's cortisol, have them track steps every day of their life in the off season. It's the most annoying thing I see when I get clients from other coaches. I'm like, you're in the off season, supposed to be growing. Why are you tracking 10,000 steps a day?
Right, right. Yeah, I guess because that gives you more caloric burn, and so you want to, it gives you a license to eat more. So the people want to hang on to that, and that's why it's become so popular. It seems like everybody is like well known that it's not just your cardio and your posing and your weightlifting. Everybody knows you also do steps, and so now I pay attention to always ask everybody that I'm interviewing about that as well. Because if they're telling me they're just doing 1 hour of cardio and then 1 hour of lifting, like there's more to that than this story. So
yeah, there's times it's a beneficial tool, but most of the time I see people really stressed out about it. I had 4 girls come to me from a coach, and they had no complaints to him. They were just burnt out on all the data they had to track, and steps being one of them. And
right.
I was like, you're either losing weight or gaining weight. So that in turn is part of your steps that are included in your,
Right.
daily caloric burn. So we don't
Right.
really have to watch it at that point in time.
Got it. Okay. You mentioned water. Do you recommend a gallon of water a day?
Yeah, I think a gallon's a good general recommendation, but if we want to get halfway scientific about it, if you're thirsty, definitely do not refrain from drinking it, especially if you're an athlete, you're going to be typically more dehydrated than your average person. So,
Yeah, for me, I noticed that something that I implemented is I cut out caffeine it's been like around 7 months, and that's because it triggered headaches. And because caffeine also is an appetite suppressant, but also it messes with your thirst signals, which is why when you're drinking coffee, it doesn't really, unless you develop the habit of drinking water, it doesn't really allow you to drink as much water as your body normally would have asked for. And so a great thing that I've realized, like after quitting caffeine, is that I drink a lot more water and I'm not as dehydrated, just because my thirst signal seems to, like, they seem to have kind of healed in a way. And that is like a little hack, you know. So I'm not forcing myself to drink this amount of cups. I'm not tracking and, you know, doing all that kind of stuff.
absolutely. And even acute dehydration can damage the kidneys. So a lot of people don't realize that. So when these competitors are cutting water for shows for no reason to look worse, you know, that's really something you want to preach, is staying hydrated.
Yeah, so true. Have you heard about Michael Phelps not taking any recovery day for like years on end? I think it was, I don't know if it was 3 years or 5 years in a row where he literally did not take a day off. He would train 7 days a week. And he said it one time, I watched it, it was on CNN, and some CNN reporter, I guess, asked him. And so I literally watched him say it, like I know for a fact that it's true. So do you have, I don't know, are you familiar with that story? And do you have any thoughts regarding that?
Just that it's the best swimmer in the world. So I'll ask the question, is that what works? Or is he just a phenomenal athlete that anything would work for? And I battle this with my industry all the time. So let's use Miss Olympia as an example. And I don't know the dynamics of Jen's prep, but let's say Jen Dory cuts water and she won the Olympia. Well, there's a very small criteria that's involved with bikini. So if maybe she's on the larger muscular side, she might need to do that to downsize, but it's not to make her look better. If you're on the smaller side, you need to keep water in so your muscles are full and big, and and that you're tight. So I find 99% of my girls I work with are not too big for bikini that they need to cut water.
Right. I see. Okay.
So I wonder how much better he could be if he took one day off.
Yeah. It's something like those are some of the things that I think of when I know that I should have a day off and recover. And I'm like, but Michael Phelps didn't. Why should I? That's I guess that's a little bit of a way to justify keeping that hustle going, you know?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the good enough to win, you know. He was good enough to win. Would he be better, you know, with that rest day? I think is the exact question that we need to ask in that scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about, I think, probably the thing that is the vast or the most important part of the whole equation, and that is the mindset. Let me give you this open question. What are your thoughts first on mindset and discipline and what it takes to be successful in weight loss and then in competing?
You know, I'll use Amanda as a very good example of this. She knows that she gets the tools from me and she has the ability to use those tools or not use those tools. She's got a very good mind. We've gotten some placements that we have not liked, and she never blamed me or the protocol. And I really look at my coaching dynamic as co-pilot and co-pilot. It's not do as I say. We'll communicate and if you don't want to do 60 minutes of cardio, well, let's maybe pull food down instead. Or maybe you have a day you do more when you're more free and then less on the other days. So it really comes down to being able to ask questions to allow your coach to customize your program as much as possible for you. So also just having that, this is on me mindset too. And you could blame the judges for a bad placement, but that's what they pick that day, and that stinks when that happens. But we also have the choice to go to other shows. So if you choose to go to that show, you can't complain about the placement. So it really is this is all on me, and you are kind of up there on your own, even though you're getting coached through it. So I think people that have that self accountability do the best.
Yeah. It's like an all or nothing kind of mindset, or like an all in, I guess is a better way to put it. You can't do it halfway through, because it is a big commitment, and every area in your life affects the results, your relationship with your spouse, if you have a support system or not, your job, all those things. So if you decide to go on this weight loss journey and then eventually compete, if you want to compete, I think a lot of things have to change, and you have to go with that all in attitude and understand that there are going to be very difficult days, right? And when those happen, you have to be prepared. You have to know, what is your response going to be? Or are you going to feel like, I'm not used to this, what do I do now? Like, you can't, because a lot of people, if they haven't had that kind of experience before, maybe in other areas of their life where they haven't had to go out of their comfort zone, they don't know what to do when those cravings hit, when you're so tired, and it clouds the way you think about everything.
Absolutely. It takes a different beast for someone to do a contest prep. And this is why we kind of see the annoyed coaches out there saying, like, I'm not your babysitter, and I'm pretty dynamic on how I work. So like I said, I have people who message me at the end of the day just to say I hit my macros. And, that doesn't really take me a whole lot of extra time, but I kind of hate seeing posts like that, because it kind of tells our industry, you can't get what you need to make this happen. And I know plenty of coaches who need business and would handhold somebody through the process. So I think saying, maybe I won't hold your hand, but maybe this coach would, is a better method. And, I'll do anything within reason. I had a client who wanted a FaceTime call every week, and I have to charge more for that. And she was like, this is cool, because no coach told me that they would do that for me. I'm like, I will, but it's just going to cost this much more if we do. And she was perfectly happy with that. So I think we send the message sometimes too much that you can't have what you want, or you can't have the service that you need. And I kind of hate that message, because there's coaches willing to grind out there that maybe don't have clients who maybe would do a large service for not that big of a price,
Yeah, that's a great way of working in this fitness field, and I think that's why you're so successful at it, because it's not like this cookie cutter approach. Those are my services, that's the program, and that's what I charge. Like, you're very open to every client, what they feel like they need, because they know themselves also better, right, than everybody else. I mean, they've had the experiences in the past, probably they know what they need to do this time around to be successful, and so you are very accommodating to that. And obviously I feel very comfortable saying that that's probably one of the biggest reasons too that you're so successful and people stay with you for so long. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's talk. So I guess we covered the mindset, I guess, when we talk about the accountability, right? And the need for discipline. Is there anything other than those two, or anything additional it's just such an important topic, and I want to make sure that if you have anything else I'm not thinking about, that we touch upon.
I just think the drive to communicate is key too, to take the time to manicure this process and perfect it, and the ability to learn. Because I could give someone a blueprint to success to get to the stage and probably give them 12 weeks ahead of time and be relatively successful at it. But if they're willing to let me be their caddy through the process, so I don't know if they're going to be in the sand trap by week 3 or shot 3, I need to be able to teach them, how to get out of the sand trap if they're in it, versus just give them a plan. So I think the ability to learn is, you want to learn the reason why, so we can fuel you when, maybe when you don't compete anymore, or maybe when you don't have me as a coach. I want you to realize you can lose weight and you can be a great role model for your kids. It's not necessarily about how you look, but it's your health, your physical and mental, and just, really being able to know, hey, I can also stay healthy without being in a contest prep scenario.
Okay. And do you feel that because it requires so much of a discipline and dedication, commitment, and also obviously restriction, that there is a very high rate of binge eating episodes? How often do you feel like those things happen with competitors, or even with people who want you to just help them lose weight, not necessarily compete?
I think too, one thing I want to point out, it's not just binge eating. It's like when food goes down, it seems like people find a different happiness to scratch. So if it's not binge eating, it might be binge spending. Are they on Amazon all the time because they can't eat? Or are they maybe like seeking validation or comments through social media? Luckily, I don't see that as much from my people anymore. And I think a lot of my people are older, maybe married as well. So that probably makes a difference from what I see. But I see a lot of binge type behaviors. Are we scratching that dopamine rush from, me posting my abs on social media? Or am I spending a lot of money? Did I buy a new car because, just because I can't eat right now? So I do tell people, try not to make like huge decisions during prep. But I do find that a lot of people, when they get into prep, they never even use the word binge eating before. And unfortunately, it's like my clients find that word binge like a golden nugget that I don't like to teach them. And I had a client who went to visit her family this weekend, and she said, I binged and I had pizza. And I said, you're very far in your reverse. You're up to about 340 carbs a day and 80 fats. And how many slices of pizza did you have? And she said 3. I said, well, what did you call that before you started competing? And she said, I don't know. I said, good answer. Keep that up. I said, you didn't binge this weekend. You just had a relaxing weekend with your family.
Yeah, a normal meal that, yeah, you wouldn't have thought twice about before you start competing. But the moment you start restricting or going on a diet, then we start looking at that as something wrong, But yeah, like, relax, chill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So since you mentioned the reverse dieting, how important is that? And I think a bigger question that I really want answered is, do you think it's best to go back up to maintenance, or do you think it's best to ease into that reverse dieting and stay in that a little bit of deficit, up until we raise the calories back up?
That's a great question. Actually, out of all the podcasts I've been on, I don't think anyone's asked me that specifically. So this is great. I think as long as the psychology is there, the slow reverse is the best way to go. They can usually lose a little bit of body fat in the initial phases of the reverse. We can kind of slowly adapt upward. If the psychology is not there, we're going to try to go straight to maintenance right away.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if they're about to fall off the bike, why push it down the hill and
Even more,
do the
yeah.
slow reverse? But if they're mentally really strong, let's kind of use that strength. But the moments we start hearing, hey, I was in the freezer last night and grabbed peanut butter and I ate like a plethora of things, we might say, hey, let's start working in some
Right.
things.
And I think we
Yeah,
should tell everybody the reason they're in the freezer is because you've frozen those addictive foods, so it's not as easy. But
that's
you
true.
still went after it.
I've had people do that actually.
Really, that's funny. Feels like something that I would do. That's hilarious. Okay. What do you think is the key to success after all the experience you've had working with so many people? What do you think is the key to success in weight loss in general and then in competition?
I honestly think that fear blocks us from our full potential a lot of times. It's something I'm still learning at 41 years old. People are afraid. People are afraid what people will say. People are afraid of failing. People hire me as a service and they're afraid I'm going to drop them or like yell at them or, people are just naturally fearful. And I think fear stops a lot of people from unlocking their full potential.
Interesting. So people are scared that you're gonna drop them from the coaching program. It's like,
People think way too much of me or like think way too highly of me, like he's not going to want to work with me or I'm not going to go pro, he's not going to want to work with me. And it's crazy what people think. They think the outcome might be of a certain situation. They're afraid to tell me they binge, they're afraid to tell me they only went 5 over on their carbs, which is not a big deal. We have this whole ideal of perfection nowadays, I think, and anything beyond that seems like failure. And
yeah.
it comes from our industry. I see coaches that post second place as last place. Well, you better have a damn good track record if you're going to promote that. I better not see any of your clients get third place then, but there are second place pro cards at certain shows. So I don't have that mentality at all.
Interesting. I did not expect that answer at all, but that makes total sense. And would you say also fear of going all in is also a factor? Because I feel like there's a general environment right now whereby it's okay to bash fitness people, but it's not okay to talk any kind of negativity towards anybody who has a problem with being overweight or obesity. It's being normalized and it's become taboo to even mention it. But anything in the opposite direction where you actually have to do the incredible amount of work that needs to be done to pull yourself out from that spot and get healthier, that is okay to bash. And people, I feel, when they go through the hardships of eating better and going through those withdrawal from eating addictive foods and go through the hardship of being tired but still having to work out, they start having those thoughts, maybe like, maybe everybody's right, maybe this is extreme, maybe there's a fear of actually going all in and recognizing like this is actually what it takes. Like it takes a lot, but you won't hear that because not a lot of people are going to make money selling you something so difficult.
Yeah, that's an amazing topic. A couple different things I want to point on. There are a lot of accounts that kind of prey on competitors who maybe couldn't do it. And it's not that they can't do it. They just maybe weren't able to do it at that time. So you'll have competitors who are like, competing's the devil. It ruined me. And they say it messed up their hormones. But when you ask those people, you say, which ones? They're like, I don't know, it's just messed up my hormones. So I'm like, you mean you've never had the specific hormones tested that for the past 5 years you've said are messed up? You know,
Right.
honestly, if our hormones could really get messed up, we would never survive the ice age or these years of, very, very hard times. So I think people love preying on people and prey on maybe their misfortunes and saying, hey, we couldn't do this process either. We can all be angry in a corner and say, this is the we hate competing group because we couldn't do it. And it's really easy to see those online. But as a society, we're scared as heck to go all in. When we go all in, we're vulnerable. And this is something that I personally I hit a dip like right around the pandemic and probably right before. I go all in on my people, and sometimes people decide to go in a different direction, and it hurts. So for a minute there, I kind of stopped going as all in as I could, and what I found is when I lost people then, I said, well, I probably would have left me too. And now I've realized like I am going to go all in because it feels better to lose somebody knowing you did everything you could for them versus holding back. And we all need to face that vulnerability of failing, going all in, and just accepting that sometimes going all in isn't enough, but it is enough because you did everything you could.
Yeah, just do it for the feeling that it gives you. It's not for like the guarantee that you're gonna, keep your clients or achieve that goal, but just knowing that you did everything, you didn't leave anything on the table, and then whatever happens, happens. But at least it wasn't because of you. It wasn't because of your actions.
Yeah, we worry about what people will say or think. And, like when you get married, there's probably somebody that's like, oh, that's not going to last. And then, here you are, in your 80s or 100s and you're still there, it's, people will always have something to say about any account. And I think we kind of worry about that too much. And we do tend to worry about the things we can't control a lot too.
Yeah, that's true. And that's another actually technique that I use with regards to discipline. Like the greater the amount of uncertainty that you can handle while still going all in and doing the work and being disciplined, that's a form of mental strength. And you can train your brain to become stronger by putting yourself in situations where there are no guarantees, Now, some people, if they've been raised in a harsher environment, like for example, I grew up in Lebanon where it was, nothing was guaranteed, So for me, operating in without any guarantees is what I grew up in. It's very normal for me. I don't expect to have a guarantee. Like I remember when I left to come here and do my doctorate in exercise physiology in Miami, I had never really left Lebanon. I had lived all my life in Lebanon. And I flew in on a one-way ticket to Miami to start my doctorate. And I knew that they were going to pay me for 9 months. I had no idea how I was going to survive for the remainder 3 months of the summer. No idea and no plan. I just winged it, and I know that I was able to do that because it was easy for me to live without any guarantee because that's just how it was over there. So for me, this comes naturally. For somebody else, maybe who grew up in a very secure, safe, loving environment, they need that guarantee to be able to operate. But that's okay because it's a skill that you can actually develop, and you could just being aware of that and being intentional about it. Eventually, you put in your situations, you put yourself in enough situations where you realize oftentimes nothing bad's going to happen, and you will figure it out eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah, buying my fourth home has been much different from my first three, and it's a little less scary than the other times. So
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Do you feel like we left anything that we did not touch upon that you feel that our audience would benefit from?
I can't think of anything, to be quite honest.
Maybe cravings. I think we talked about binge eating. Did we touch upon cravings, how you handle cravings in your competitors?
Yeah, we didn't, but we can. Um, the thing is, can we have the craving and satisfy it without being detrimental to our goal? And sometimes it's thinking outside the box. Maybe I really want to have something that tastes like chocolate with peanut butter. Well, maybe we can do oats, chocolate protein powder, and peanut butter. So finding something similar, or maybe we're reversing, and maybe that's part of the goal, is to be able to have something without gaining weight, because we're slowly, bumping up our metabolic rate as we reverse diet.
Okay, so yeah, trust, be crafty and come up with different recipes. Like you can still hit those macros and those calories, and you don't have to be so rigid to the point where you break and you fall off the wagon.
Yeah, and I was always a chocolate and peanut butter fan. So usually my morning breakfast was protein, oats, and peanut butter.
Interesting. Yeah, growing up in Lebanon, peanut butter wasn't as big of a thing, even though we had it and we would buy it and stuff, but it wasn't this thing that it is here in the United States. I mean, everybody like just loves that taste of peanut butter. And I started liking it more obviously when I came over here, because it familiarize, like your taste buds get familiarized to it, and then you just start liking it.
Yeah,
One more really important thing that I forgot to ask you, do you think that setting a deadline is important for a weight loss goal or a competition goal?
I think it can be, because it can kind of put the light at the end of the tunnel. But if you do have that deadline, you need to have, what happens when you get to the end of the tunnel, and teach people that this process isn't over. So, once you save the amount of money you want in your bank account, you obviously don't want to spend it right away. So keeping people educated on that. If they don't have a deadline, that can be kind of hard, because then there seems to maybe be no end in sight. But if people are willing to be patient and just let your body take the time to lose the weight slowly, it's going to be more sustainable for them. And I think beyond, getting pro cards and, doing all the things that See You Later Leaner has done, I think one of the best things we do is teaching people how to do this for life, teaching them how to do it sustainably. I think this is why so many of my clients, after working with me, do start coaching businesses, because they want to share that with their friends, family, and the world. And I'm okay with that, because I feel like I'm just kind of spreading new life everywhere.
Yeah, it's one of the best things somebody can do for themselves. It changes your outlook on life. You become more optimistic, you're happier, you have more energy. Maybe not right after your lifting session, but in general, you have more energy. And I truly believe that it's one of the biggest elements of happiness in life, because if you don't feel good in your own skin, then I don't care how much money you can make. I don't care I don't feel, at least for me, and maybe I'm generalizing, but I just see that also, like I noticed that in my environment. I feel like you can't possibly be happy if you're dealing with sickness and being overweight and not being able to move freely in your body. I mean, that's where you live. Your body's where you live. It's not the house that you buy, you know?
Yeah, I think it depends. Observing my uncle, who lived longer than my father, which no one expected. He was a heavy guy, and probably the happiest guy I had ever met. And I think it only came down to when he couldn't do things. So whether it be like maybe an athletic activity, but for the most part, he did seem very happy. But I do think that that's very rare too. So we're we're kind of born to protect ourselves, right? So if I set my hand on a pan, it's hot, I'm going to take my hand off. And I think some people can handle more burn than others, for instance. So some
Mhm.
people are kind of okay to be on that red line of, being heavier. And I'm kind of like, good for them, because everyone really does deserve a piece of happiness. I just know, because of me competing, like, I take my hand off the pan a lot quicker than I used to, for sure. And it's always given me a heightened sense. And I also like to compare this to when a NASCAR driver goes 200 miles around the track. When they're on the freeway home with their trophy going 70, they feel like they're going really slow. So with my competitors, when they feel fat, I'm like, look, you're like a NASCAR driver going 70 miles an hour. Your physique's still pretty dangerous. You just don't think so.
I love it. I've never thought of it that way, but what a wonderful analogy. Yes, we have different set points for what we feel comfortable with. And maybe somebody like you and I were very sensitive about even the smallest changes. And that's why we literally dive into the research, and we dive into this field, and we want to know more and how we can change the body composition, etc. And then somebody else might feel like not be as sensitive about it as somebody else. And it definitely relieves a lot of emotional pain, I think, because those last extra pounds are like the hardest, and you just work so hard at them.
Yeah. And that's where people start getting discouraged and maybe just go the complete opposite direction.
True. And then they're like, oh, I have an eating disorder, because sometimes, like, when you try so hard in those last few pounds, and then you don't know how to handle it very well in the best way possible, and you might binge or whatever, but that's fine. That's normal. You don't have an eating disorder. It's just normal that if you're trying to do something hard, that you might fail a few times before you perfect the recipe. So yeah, be very careful with labeling yourself.
I absolutely agree on that. Like, I can't dance. I don't have a dancing disorder, but I just don't care enough to, watch tutorials and try to learn. And, I think that you do just kind of find your set point and your limit, like you said, and labeling with a disorder due to not reaching your goal is a really bad place to be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate your time. And I know I took even longer than what we had anticipated. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and your experience.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this kind of content. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and also hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.